She thought bullying would get her a first-class seat. But the airline's decision left her humiliated in economy. My mom had been counting down to this flight for months. It wasn't just another trip, it was something she had saved for, planned carefully, and quietly dreamed about. Life hadn't been easy on her the past few years. Between working nonstop, putting family first, and never really doing anything extravagant for herself, this flight felt like a small reward she truly deserved. When she finally told me she'd upgraded to first class, I remember how proud she sounded, even a little shy, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to enjoy something that nice. The day of the flight, she arrived early, just like she always does. She dressed neatly but simply comfortable shoes, a soft cardigan, a favorite handbag that she had for years. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed luxury, but that didn't matter to her. What mattered was the experience. When she handed over her boarding pass and the agent directed her toward first class, her face lit up. She texted me immediately, saying how polite everyone was and how calm the airport felt that morning. Boarding began smoothly. As she stepped onto the plane, a flight attendant greeted her warmly, took her coat, and showed her to her seat. A real first-class seat. Wide, clean, perfectly positioned by the window. She sat down slowly, almost carefully, as if she didn't want to disturb the moment. She placed her bag under the seat, buckled in, and looked around with quiet amazement. The cabin was peaceful, no rushing, no loud conversations, no chaos, just soft lighting, gentle voices, and that feeling of being taken care of. Another attendant came by and offered her a welcome drink. She hesitated for a second, then smiled and accepted. She told me later that even holding that glass felt special, like she was doing something bold just by saying yes. Around her, other passengers settled in, some dressed in business attire, others in casual travel clothes. No one paid much attention to anyone else. It was relaxed, respectful, and exactly what first class is supposed to feel like. She messaged me again, sending a quick photo of the window view and saying, "I feel so lucky right now." That was my mom, grateful for the smallest comforts. Never entitled, never demanding. She leaned back, adjusted her seat, and closed her eyes for a moment, just soaking it all in. This was her time, her seat, her moment of peace before takeoff. At that point, everything was perfect. The cabin door was still open. Soft boarding music played in the background, and the air felt calm and orderly. She had no idea that within minutes, that calm would shatter. No warning, no hint, just the quiet before a storm she never asked for. She was simply a woman enjoying the one luxury she allowed herself, unaware that someone else was already watching, already judging, and already deciding that my mom didn't belong there. The calm didn't last long. As more passengers boarded, the quiet rhythm of first class was interrupted by louder voices drifting in from the aisle. My mom noticed it immediately, not because she was nosy, but because the contrast was impossible to ignore. The soft conversations around her were suddenly drowned out by sharp laughter and an unmistakably commanding tone that carried far beyond normal indoor volume. That's when Karen appeared. She marched into first class with the confidence of someone who believed every space she entered already belonged to her. Her hair was perfectly styled, her outfit expensive and loud in a way that demanded attention, and her expression suggested annoyance before anything had even gone wrong. Trailing behind her were a few friends, all talking over one another, clearly energized and unconcerned with the peaceful atmosphere they were disrupting. My mom watched quietly as Karen stopped in the aisle and looked around, her eyes scanning the cabin. It wasn't admiration, it was evaluation, like she was taking inventory. Then her gaze landed on my mom's seat. Karen froze for just a moment. Her lips tightened, and her eyes narrowed slightly. She leaned toward her friends and whispered something that made them glance over. Then back at my mom. Then back at Karen. They all laughed softly, the kind of laugh that carries judgment without saying a word. Karen stepped closer. My mom felt it before she heard it, that uncomfortable awareness of being watched. She shifted slightly in her seat, unsure why the woman was standing there instead of moving along. Karen cleared her throat loudly, as if expecting immediate attention. "Excuse me," Karen said, her voice dripping with forced politeness. I think you were sitting in the wrong seats. My mom blinked, genuinely confused. She smiled politely and replied that she didn't think so. She even held up her boarding pass, ready to double-check if there had been some mistake. Karen didn't look at the boarding pass. She didn't need to. In her mind, the mistake wasn't the seat number, it was who was sitting in it. These seats are for first class, Karen said, gesturing around dramatically. My friends and I are supposed to be sitting together. My mom explained calmly that she had booked the seat herself and that her ticket clearly said first class. She kept her voice gentle, respectful, the way she always does. That only seemed to irritate Karen more. Karen sighed loudly and rolled her eyes. Look, she said, lowering her voice as if she were being generous. Why don't you just switch with them? You'll be doing everyone a favor. They're back in economy. But it's really not that bad. My mom felt her stomach tighten. The implication was clear. Karen hadn't even asked if she wanted to switch, she had assumed she would. As if my mom's comfort was negotiable. But Karen's convenience was not. When my mom hesitated, Karen's tone shifted. The politeness vanished. Her voice sharpened. Honestly, she muttered. Not quietly enough. Some people really don't belong up here. That's when heads began to turn. A few passengers glanced over, sensing tension. My mom's face flushed not from guilt, but from embarrassment. She had done nothing wrong. Yet she was being made to feel like she had to justify her presence. Karen crossed her arms and added, if you have any decency, you'll move. We pay good money too. What Karen didn't realize, what she hadn't bothered to check, was that my mom had paid for her seat fair and square. And unlike Karen, she wasn't about to bully someone else to get what she wanted. By the time Karen raised her voice, the entire first-class cabin could feel the shift in energy. What had been calm and almost serene moments earlier now felt tense and uncomfortable. Like everyone was holding their breath. My mom stayed seated, her hands folded neatly in her lap, trying to keep her composure. She had never been the confrontational type, and being put on the spot like this made her heart race. Still, she reminded herself that she had done nothing wrong. Karen, on the other hand, seemed to thrive on the attention. When my mom didn't immediately move, Karen let out a sharp laugh that echoed down the aisle. Are you serious right now? She said loudly. I've never seen someone argue over a seat they clearly shouldn't have. My mom calmly responded that her boarding pass confirmed the seat was hers and that she was happy to show it again. She reached for her bag, but Karen cut her off with an exaggerated wave of her hand. I don't need to see it. Karen snapped. I know how this works. That was when the first flight attendant approached, drawn in by the raised voices. She smiled professionally and asked if there was a problem. Karen immediately turned toward her, her expression flipping from aggressive to wounded in a split second. Yes, there is a problem, Karen said, speaking quickly. This woman refuses to move so my friends and I can sit together. We paid for better seats, and now she is holding things up. The attendant turned to my mom, who quietly explained that she had booked the seat herself and had no intention of switching. She spoke softly, but her words were clear. She even held up her boarding pass, showing the seat number and cabin class. The attendant nodded, acknowledging it. But before she could respond, Karen jumped back in. This is ridiculous, Karen said, her voice growing louder. We were going to be delayed because she wanted to cooperate. I travel all the time. I know first class, and she doesn't look like she belongs here. That comment landed like a slap. A few nearby passengers gasped softly. Others looked away, clearly uncomfortable. One man across the aisle frowned openly, his jaw tightening. Karen's friends shifted awkwardly behind her, but none of them told her to stop. The flight attendant straightened slightly, her polite smile fading into something firmer. She asked Karen to lower her voice and reminded her that all seating assignments were based on tickets, not appearance. That only fueled Karen's outrage. So now I am being lectured, Karen snapped. Unbelievable. I am the one being disrespected here. She folded her arms and planted herself in the aisle, blocking movement. Boarding stalled. Passengers behind her were forced to wait, creating a visible backup. Murmurs spread through the cabin. Someone sighed loudly. Another passenger whispered, "This is insane." My mom felt tears sting her eyes not because she was weak, but because the humiliation was overwhelming. She had wanted this flight to be peaceful, something she could enjoy quietly. Instead, she was being turned into a spectacle. Finally, a second crew member arrived. Then a third. Karen repeated her story again, louder each time, painting herself as the victim and my mom as unreasonable. She demanded that the crew fix this immediately, and insisted that management would hear about it. What Karen didn't realize was that every word she spoke, every outburst, every insult, was being carefully observed. And while she thought she was asserting control, she was actually doing the exact opposite. Once the senior crew members arrived, the tone of the situation shifted almost immediately. Where Karen had been loud and chaotic, the crew was calm, precise, and unshaken. They didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. Instead, they began doing what they were trained to do: observe, verify, and take control without spectacle. That calm professionalism only seemed to irritate Karen more, because it stripped her of the attention she was craving. One of the attendants politely asked both parties for their boarding passes. My mom handed hers over right away, her hand still trembling slightly but her posture steady. Karen hesitated, clearly annoyed by the request, as if it were an insult to even question her. She dug through her purse dramatically, muttering under her breath about incompetence and wasted time, before finally thrusting her boarding pass toward the attendant. The crew didn't comment. They simply checked the information carefully. Seat numbers, cabin class, passenger names, upgrade history. Everything was reviewed quietly on a tablet, then cross-checked with the airline system. While this was happening, Karen continued to complain, pacing the aisle and sighing loudly, making sure everyone could hear how unfairly she believed she was being treated. "This is unbelievable," she said to no one in particular. "I fly all the time. I've never seen customer service this bad." The crew didn't respond. They didn't need to. Their silence wasn't uncertainty, it was calculation. Another attendant gently asked Karen to step aside so boarding could continue. Karen scoffed but moved half a step, still blocking enough space to make her displeasure obvious. Passengers began to settle back into their seats, watching discreetly. The atmosphere felt heavy, but also expectant, like everyone sensed something was about to change. My mom sat quietly, staring at her hands, replaying the confrontation in her head. She worried that somehow, despite being right, she might still lose her seat. She had seen enough situations where loud, aggressive people got their way simply because others wanted peace. But the crew's behavior told a different story. They weren't rushing. They weren't bending. They were letting the facts speak. After a few minutes, the lead attendant nodded slightly to another crew member. It was subtle, but purposeful. They stepped aside together, speaking in low voices. Karen tried to lean in, clearly wanting to hear what was being said, but she was gently asked to wait. That was when the realization started to dawn on her. The smile she had expected never returned. No one apologized to her. No one reassured her that she did get what she wanted. Instead, the crew returned with neutral expressions and a quiet confidence that signaled a decision had already been made. The lead attendant addressed Karen calmly. She explained that seating assignments were final, that my mom's first-class seat was valid, and that there would be no seat changes. Karen immediately opened her mouth to argue, but the attendant raised a hand not aggressively, just firmly. "There's more," she said. Karen froze. The attendant continued, explaining that disrupting boarding, blocking the aisle, and making inappropriate remarks toward another passenger violated airline conduct policies. Each sentence was delivered evenly, without judgment, but the meaning was unmistakable. Karen's behavior had crossed a line. Around them, passengers leaned in slightly, pretending not to listen while hearing every word. Karen's friends suddenly looked very interested in the floor. The crew hadn't made their decision in anger. They hadn't acted on emotion. They had simply followed protocol, and Karen had unknowingly provided them with everything they needed. Once the senior crew members arrived, the entire atmosphere shifted in a way that was impossible to miss. The chaos Karen had created didn't escalate, it evaporated. Where her voice had been sharp and dominating, the crew responded with calm authority, the kind that doesn't need volume to be effective. They didn't match her energy. They slowed everything down, and that alone began to strip her of control. The lead flight attendant politely asked for boarding passes from both sides. My mom handed hers over immediately. Her hands trembled just slightly, but she held her head high. Karen, on the other hand, acted offended by the request. She rolled her eyes, huffed loudly, and made a show of digging through her designer bag as if the delay itself were an insult. When she finally produced her boarding pass, she thrust it forward without a word of courtesy. The crew examined both passes carefully. Seat numbers, cabin class, upgrade status. Everything was verified against the system on their tablet. They spoke quietly among themselves, using short, professional phrases that gave nothing away. Karen hovered close, trying to listen, muttering comments about wasted time and terrible service, clearly expecting the crew to hurry up and side with her. They didn't. One attendant gently asked Karen to step aside so boarding could continue. Karen shifted just enough to comply while still making her frustration obvious. The aisle slowly cleared. Passengers settled into their seats again, but no one stopped watching. The tension hadn't disappeared, it had transformed into anticipation. My mom sat silently, her heart pounding. She had done nothing wrong. Yet she knew how often loud people were rewarded simply to restore peace. She braced herself for disappointment, even as the crew's demeanor gave her hope. They weren't rushed. They weren't flustered. They were methodical. After several minutes, the lead attendant exchanged a glance with another crew member and nodded. It was subtle, but final. They stepped a few feet away, speaking softly out of earshot. Karen leaned forward instinctively, trying to catch every word, but she was firmly asked to wait where she was. When the crew returned, their expressions had changed, not angry, not smug, just resolved. The lead attendant addressed Karen directly. She explained calmly that my mom's seat assignment was valid, fully paid, and non-negotiable. There would be no seat switching. Karen opened her mouth to protest, but the attendant raised her hand slightly, stopping her without raising her voice. She continued, explaining that delaying boarding, blocking the aisle, and making derogatory remarks toward another passenger violated airline conduct policy. Each point was stated clearly, professionally, and without emotion. Karen's face shifted from indignation to disbelief. Around them, other passengers sat perfectly still. No phones were raised. No one spoke, but everyone listened. Karen's friends suddenly avoided eye contact, their earlier confidence draining away. The realization began to sink in, not just for Karen, but for everyone watching. The crew hadn't just checked seats. They had assessed behavior. And Karen, without realizing it, had failed that test completely. The decision had already been made. The cabin went completely silent when the lead flight attendant finished speaking. For a brief moment, Karen just stood there, staring as if she hadn't fully processed what she'd heard. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed again. She looked around, waiting, almost expecting someone to step in and defend her, to tell the crew there had been a mistake. No one did. "Ma'am," the attendant said calmly, "please gather your belongings." Karen's face flushed deep red. "You can be serious," she snapped. "This is outrageous. I did nothing wrong." The attendant didn't argue. She simply repeated the instruction and gestured toward the back of the plane. Another crew member stepped forward, standing quietly beside her. There was no aggression, no force, just presence. The kind that made it clear this wasn't a discussion anymore. Karen turned to her friends, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you seeing this?" she demanded. They didn't answer. One of them shifted uncomfortably. Another pretended to check her phone. The confidence they shared earlier was gone, replaced by awkward silence. No one spoke up. No one offered to trade seats with her now. As Karen grabbed her bag, her movements became frantic. She muttered under her breath, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, about filing complaints, calling corporate, and making sure everyone paid for this. The threats rang hollow. The crew remained unmoved. She was escorted down the aisle, past the very first-class seats she had tried to claim. Each step felt slower than the last. Passengers avoided eye contact, not out of sympathy, but out of discomfort at being so close to someone unraveling in public. A few couldn't help watching quietly, their expressions unreadable. When Karen reached the economy section, the truth of her situation became painfully clear. Her original seat wasn't even a decent one. It was a basic economy middle seat, several rows from her friends, with limited legroom and no overhead bin space nearby. The irony was brutal. This isn't acceptable, Karen protested, her voice cracking slightly now. My friends are up there. A crew member replied evenly that seat assignments were final and that further disruption could result in removal from the flight altogether. That shut her up. She dropped into the seat, crossing her arms tightly, her jaw clenched in humiliation. Up front, the cabin slowly returned to its earlier calm. The door closed. The safety demonstration began. It was as if a storm had passed, leaving quiet in its wake. My mom sat still for a moment, her heart still racing, unsure if it was really over. Then a flight attendant approached her, speaking softly. She apologized for the disturbance and thanked my mom for her patience. She offered her a fresh drink and asked if she needed anything at all. My mom smiled politely, her hands finally steady. As the plane taxied for takeoff, she looked out the window again. The same view she'd admired before everything went wrong. Only now, it felt even sweeter. Not because Karen had been punished, but because fairness had won. For the rest of the flight, my mom was treated with warmth and respect. She reclined her seat, enjoyed her meal, and felt a quiet sense of peace settle in. Far behind her, Karen sat in silence, staring straight ahead, surrounded by the consequences of her own entitlement. And my mom, she flew first class exactly as she deserved without giving up an inch. If you enjoyed this story and believe respect still matters, hit subscribe. New stories like this are posted regularly, and you won't want to miss the next one.